Well, Dana, first of all, what's putting the residents of Springfield at risk, which was a town completely ignored by the American media until Donald Trump and I started surfacing some of these concerns, is that they can't afford housing, they can't afford health care. The schools have been overwhelmed, the hospitals have been overwhelmed, and they're overwhelmed because Kamala Harris allowed 20,000 Haitian migrants to get dropped into a small Ohio town of about 40,000 people, and it's completely overwhelmed the services. Now, you ask, why have I talked about some of the things that I've been talking about? Let me just say this. My constituents have brought approximately a dozen separate concerns to me. 10 of them are verifiable and confirmable, and a couple of them I talk about because my constituents are telling me firsthand that they're seeing these things. So I have two options, Dana. I can ignore them, which is what the American media has done for years to this community, or I can actually talk about what people are telling me. And of course, many of the things that the media says are completely baseless have since been confirmed. For example, I was told, Dana, that by the American media, that it was baseless that migrants were capturing the geese from the local park pond and eating them. And yet there are 911 calls from well before this ever became a viral sensation of people complaining about that exact thing happening. So my attitude is listen to my constituents. Sometimes they're going to say things that people don't like, but they're saying things that people don't like because their town has been overwhelmed, and it's my job to try to fight for them and to protect them. Kamala Harris opened the border, and now these people are suffering. That's what I'm focused on, Dana. Dana, first of all, let me just respond to a couple of things that you said, but I want to start with something you said, which I think is frankly disgusting and is more appropriate for a Democratic propagandist than it is for an American journalist. There is nothing that I have said that has led to threats against these hospitals. These hospitals, the bomb threats and so forth, it's disgusting. The violence is disgusting. We condemn it. We condemn all violence and threats of violence. But to say, no, Dana, to say, Dana, no, you asked a question, Dana, and I'm going to go ahead and answer it. What we have said is that this town has suffered terribly under the policies of Kamala Harris. Now, you just accused me of inciting violence against the community when all that I've done is surface the complaints of my constituents, people who are suffering because of Kamala Harris's policies. Are we not allowed to talk about these problems because some psychopaths are threatening violence? We can condemn the violence on the one hand, but also talk about the terrible consequences of Kamala Harris's open border on the other hand. Now, let me just fact check a couple of other things that you said, Dana, because it's important. You said that all of these migrants are in the country legally. They are in the country through what's called temporary protective status. That is when Kamala Harris waved a magic amnesty wand, taking people and giving them legal status. That is not to say that they're here legally. That is a terrible indictment of her amnesty policies that have further opened the border and further caused terrible migration into this country. No, Dana. You made a point. You don't. I agree. You don't want to talk about policy, Dana, which is why you're talking about utter distractions instead of about the fact that Kamala Harris, Dana, granted amnesty at a mass level. She granted amnesty at a mass level. Dana, my constituents were the ones who talked about eating dog and cats, and I talked about it because you were ignoring this community. My constituents talked about it, and it is my responsibility to surface their concerns when the American media ignores it. Dana, I've been to Springfield probably 100 times in my life. I've taken my children to get ice cream at Young's Jersey Dairy. Have I been in the last 4 days? No, I haven't been in the last 4 days, but I've talked to a lot of people in Springfield, Dana, and they're telling me this stuff is happening. Dana, would you like to ask me questions and then let me answer them, or would you like to debate me on these topics? I noticed that when you had Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, you gave them multiple choice answers to the questions that you asked, and you allowed them to answer the questions. I'm happy to be here to talk about policy, but if you're going to interrupt me every single time that I open my mouth, then why am I even doing this? So please ask a question, and I'd ask you to be polite enough to let me answer it. Dana, first of all, my heart goes out to the Clark family, and I don't bring their son's name up because they've clearly expressed a preference for politicians to not bring their son's name up. I wish them all the best. I can't believe what kind of a tragedy they've experienced, but I'm still going to keep on talking about what the migrants have done to Springfield, Ohio, and what Kamala Harris's open border has done to Springfield, Ohio. And Dana, I think this illustrates the entire contrast between how we're trying to go about this debate and how a lot of the Democrats are trying to go about this debate. They're talking about 12 Proud Boys marching in Springfield, Ohio. They're talking about the frankly fake debunkings of a lot of these stories that are out there. I'm talking to my constituents and I'm hearing terrible things about what's going on in Springfield, and Kamala Harris's open border policies have caused these problems. The hospitals are overwhelmed, Dana. The schools are overwhelmed. The local services are completely overwhelmed. You have people who can't afford housing. Homelessness has gone up. Murders are up by 81% because of what Kamala Harris has allowed to happen to this small community. I'm going to keep on talking about that. Now, of course, we can criticize violence. We can also still talk about the problems that are happening in Springfield, and we should be able to do both those things simultaneously, Dana. Dana, the evidence is the first-hand account of my constituents who are telling me that this happened. And by the way, I've been trying to talk about the problems in Springfield for months, and the American media ignored it. There was a congressional hearing just last week of angel moms who lost children because Kamala Harris let criminal migrants into this country who then murdered their children. The American media totally ignored this stuff until Donald Trump and I started talking about cat memes. If I have to create stories so that the American media actually pays attention to the suffering of the American people, then that's what I'm going to do, Dana, because you guys are completely letting Kamala Harris coast. You had one interview with her. You talk about pushing back against me, Dana. You didn't push back against the fact that she cast the deciding vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which is why a lot of Americans can't afford food and housing. We ought to be talking about public policy. Dana, it comes from firsthand accounts from my constituents. I say that we're creating a story, meaning we're creating the American media focusing on it. I didn't create 20,000 illegal migrants coming into Springfield thanks to Kamala Harris's policies. Her policies did that, but yes, we created the actual focus that allowed the American media to talk about this story and the suffering caused by Kamala Harris's policies. Dana, I condemn all white supremacists. I'm obviously not. I'm married to a non-white person. I don't like these people, but I think that we have to keep our focus not on 12 marchers going down the street, but on the fact that thousands of residents have had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's policy. I find this very unusual, Dana, that the American media is more interested in a bunch of losers marching down the street than they are in the fact that Kamala Harris has made these people's lives worse. I'm not talking about 12 Proud Boys. I'm talking about 40,000 residents, 40,000 constituents of mine, many of whom can't afford housing and food because of Kamala Harris's open border. That is what I want to focus the media's attention on. We're going to keep on doing it because I think the American people deserve a government that puts their interests first. And can I make just one more final point about this, Dana? You've heard a lot of the media focusing on every possible distraction from the story in Springfield. You've heard them focus on these Proud Boys marches. You've heard just in this interview, Dana, the suggestion that because some psychopath is calling in a bomb threat, somehow we have to then ignore 40,000 Springfieldians who are having their lives worsened by Kamala Harris's policies. Well, what is the implication, Dana? I actually love to have this conversation right now live on air. What is the implication when you say you calling out these problems has caused a bomb threat? You accused me of causing a bomb threat. Doesn't that mean you should shut up about the residents of Springfield? Don't you realize you're engaged in basic propaganda to silence the concerns of American citizens? Please. No, Dana, again, I think this is actually an important conversation. Look, the Springfield mayor, he's dealing with a lot of terrible things. I certainly sympathize with the guy, and we're going to try to help him out. But he did not accuse me of inciting a bomb threat. He just didn't. And if we're going to take the firsthand accounts of people who are on the ground in Springfield, why don't you bring on some of the people on your program who say that the migrants are eating their pets? You're applying a double standard here. You're saying if one person accuses J.D. Vance, I'm going to take that person's word as the gospel truth, even if you misrepresent it. If you have another person who's saying they're eating the cats, you're going to completely ignore them, attack them, silence them, and harass them. That double standard is why the people don't trust the media and why we're not talking about public policy 51 days out from a presidential election. Dana, roll the tape. You just accused me of inciting a bomb threat. There's no evidence of this. I condemn violence and threats of violence. We should be able to do that and also still talk about what's going on in Springfield.